Abstract. Holly just wanted to go home after catching her boyfriend cheating, but a mysterious woman at a rainy bus stop had other plans. Swapping wet asphalt for a frozen magical realm, Holly finds herself in Everwinter, facing a new reality. Participate in The Dragon's Bride, a lethal reality dating show, or become a snack for the Snow Kraken. Her suitor is Duke Sterling, a man as cold as the landscape and burdened by a curse. Between navigating treacherous court politics, dodging sabotage from rival bachelorettes, and dealing with a playful baby dragon, Holly has to decide if melting the Duke's icy heart is worth the risk of freezing her own. The rain in London didn't just fall, it judged. It felt personal, a relentless, icy drizzle that seemed to know exactly where the gap in Holly's collar was. But the weather was the least of her problems. The image of Brad, her boyfriend of 2 years, the man who had claimed he was working late on the merger, entwined with a girl named Tiffany in the corner booth of the Rusty Anchor, was burned into her retinas. Holly wiped a mixture of rain and mascara from her cheek as she stumbled out of the pub, the heavy oak door slamming behind her with a finality that echoed the cracking of her heart. She didn't have an umbrella. Of course she didn't. She had left it in Brad's car, along with her dignity and the artisan cupcake she'd bought him as a surprise. She ran toward the bus shelter, her heels clicking frantically on the wet pavement. The shelter was a miserable little glass box that smelled faintly of damp wool and hopelessness, offering only marginal protection from the deluge. She hugged her arms around herself, shivering, staring at the blurred headlights passing by. Nasty night for a heartbreak, isn't it, dear? Holly jumped, nearly slipping on a wet leaf. She hadn't realized she wasn't alone. Sitting on the bench, looking entirely too dry and cheerful for the circumstances, was an elderly woman. She wore a hat that looked like a fruit basket had collided with a velvet cushion, and her tweed coat was immaculately pressed. Excuse me? Holly stammered, blinking away tears. The boyfriend, the woman said, nodding sagely. I can see that he's a scoundrel, or a radiating off you. Or maybe it's just the smudged eyeliner. Either way, dreadful business. She extended a gloved hand. Mrs. Putafoot. Holly, she replied automatically. And yes, he's a scoundrel. Well, Holly, Mrs. Putafoot stood up, smoothing her skirt. You have 2 choices. You can wait for the number 42 bus, go home to a cold flat, eat a tub of ice cream, and cry until your eyes puff shut. Or... Her eyes twinkled with a mischievous, almost dangerous light. I can offer you a Duke and a Destiny. Holly let out a wet, incredulous laugh. A Duke and a Destiny? Is that a new promotion at Starbucks? Not exactly. Mrs. Putafoot smiled, and the air around them seemed to shimmer, the sound of the rain fading into a distant hum. Think of it as a travel upgrade.
No wet asphalt.
Just a fresh start. Right now, Holly muttered, looking down at her soaked blouse, I'd trade my soul for a towel and a place where Brad doesn't exist. Done, Mrs. Putafoot beamed. Wait, I didn't mean literally. Mrs. Putafoot snapped her fingers. The sound was louder than a thunderclap. The world dissolved. The gray London street, the smell of exhaust, the rain. It all vanished in a swirl of kaleidoscope colors. Holly felt a lurch in her stomach, like an elevator dropping 10 floors at once, and she opened her mouth to scream, but the air was suddenly sucked out of her lungs. Then came the cold. It wasn't the damp chill of London. It was a biting, absolute freeze that pierced her skin instantly. Gravity returned with a vengeance, and Holly fell. She screamed as she plummeted downward, her arms flailing, until she hit water with a bone-jarring smack. She was submerged in darkness. The water was so cold it burned, seizing her muscles and driving the breath from her body. The Bay of Frost, though she didn't know the name yet, was not kind to tourists. Panic set in. She kicked frantically, her heavy soaked clothes dragging her down into the abyss. I'm going to die, she thought wildly. I'm going to die because I listened to a fruit hat lady. Just as her vision began to spot with black, something shifted in the water beneath her. A massive shadow eclipsed the faint light from above. Suddenly, she was rising. Something hard and scaled had scooped her up. She broke the surface, gasping and coughing, clinging instinctively to the rough, icy spikes of the creature that held her. She wiped the brine from her eyes and froze. She wasn't on a boat. She was clutched in the claw of a lizard. A gargantuan, white-scaled, winged lizard. "Oh my God," she wheezed, her teeth chattering so hard her jaw ached. "It's Godzilla on ice." The creature didn't roar. It banked sharply, its powerful wings beating against the gale, carrying them toward a structure that defied physics. Looming out of the snowy mist was a fortress made entirely of translucent, blue-white crystal. It grew out of the cliffside like a jagged diamond, its spires piercing the storm clouds. The Crystal Bastion. The beast landed on a wide balcony with surprising grace, depositing Holly onto the stone floor like a wet rag doll. She scrambled backward, her back hitting a frozen railing, shaking violently from hypothermia and terror. "Please don't eat me," she squeaked. "I'm mostly carbs and sadness." The lizard snorted, a puff of steam billowing from its nostrils. Then, the air shimmered again. The massive scales receded, the wings folded and dissolved into light, and the creature began to shrink and reshape. In the place of the monster stood a man. And not just any man. He was tall, with shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of the world, clad in a fitted naval-style coat with silver embroidery. His hair was the color of moonlight, windswept and wild, and his eyes were piercing shards of sapphire. He looked at her not with hunger, but with profound irritation. "Carbs and sadness," the man repeated, his voice deep and smooth, like velvet over gravel. A distinct downgrade from the tribute I was expecting. Before Holly could retort, a set of double doors threw open. A woman swept onto the balcony, flanked by guards in silver armor. She was terrifyingly elegant, wearing a high-collared gown of velvet and frost, her gray hair pulled back into a severe bun. "Sterling," she barked. "What is this? You were supposed to patrol the perimeter, not go fishing for peasants." "She fell from the sky, Mother," the man, Sterling, said, unbuttoning his heavy coat and tossing it onto Holly's shivering form. The coat was heavy and smelled of ozone and expensive cologne. "Into the bay." "From the sky?" The woman, clearly Duchess Beatrice, narrowed her eyes at Holly. "Another stray from the rift? Mrs. Putafoot's doing, I assume." She sighed, as if Holly were a stain on the carpet. "Well, bring her inside before she turns into an icicle. We can't have her dying before the paperwork is signed." An hour later, Holly was dry, thawed, and thoroughly confused. She sat in a plush velvet chair in a room that looked like the inside of a jewelry box, holding a cup of tea that tasted faintly of lavender and pine. Sterling stood by the fireplace, leaning against the mantel with crossed arms, looking brooding and devastatingly handsome. Duchess Beatrice sat opposite Holly, her posture so straight it made Holly's back hurt just looking at her. "So," Holly said, her voice still raspy. "Let me get this straight. This is Everwinter. You are Duke Sterling. You are a lizard person?" "Dragon shifter," Sterling corrected curtly. "Lord of the Crystal Bastion and Warden of the North."
"Right.
"Dragon."
Cool."
Holly took a large gulp of tea. "And Mrs. Putafoot sent me here because?" "Because she is a meddlesome chaos witch," Beatrice said disdainfully. "But you are here now, and according to the ancient laws of hospitality and the recent decree by Her Majesty the Queen, you cannot simply leave." "I have a return ticket for the bus," Holly offered weakly. "There are no buses to London from here," Sterling said. "The rift opens only when it chooses. Here is the situation, miss." Beatrice paused. "Holly, Miss Holly, you have arrived at a fortuitous, albeit inconvenient, time. My son," she gestured to Sterling, who looked like he wanted to set the room on fire, "has been mandated by the crown to take a wife, to ensure the stability of the region and other matters." "The Queen hates me," Sterling muttered. "She's turning my life into a circus." "It is a selection process," Beatrice corrected. a televised magical event known as the Dragon's Bride. Noble ladies from across the realm have gathered here to compete for Sterling's hand. Holly blinked. Like The Bachelor? With dragons? I do not know this, Bachelor, but yes. A competition, Beatrice said. And since you are here, unregistered, and without a visa, you have two options. Option A, you enter the competition as a candidate. And option B? Holly asked, hopeful. Beatrice smiled, a thin, wintry expression. Option B is that we hand you over to the Snow Kraken inhabiting the lower caverns. He hasn't had breakfast in a century, and he is quite grumpy. Holly stared at them. Sterling didn't look at her. He was staring into the fire, his jaw clenched. So, Holly said, her voice rising an octave. Date the dragon or get eaten by a kraken. That's the choice. Precisely. Beatrice clapped her hands. Welcome to the show, dear. Sterling finally looked up. I'm going to kill the producer, he growled. And then I'm going to rewrite the rules. The next morning, Holly found herself standing in a grand hall lined with ice sculptures, surrounded by 12 women who looked like they had walked straight out of a high-fashion fantasy magazine. They wore silks, satins, and jewels that probably cost more than Holly's entire life earnings. Holly, meanwhile, was wearing a borrowed gray dress that was slightly too tight in the bust and scratched her neck. Sterling stood on a dais at the front of the room, looking miserable. Beside him stood a shorter man with a clipboard and a nervous disposition, the royal advisor, Reginald. Welcome, ladies, to the first trial of the heart. Reginald squeaked. To be the Duchess of Everwinter, one must be pure of intent. We shall begin with the Eye of Truth. He gestured to a pedestal where a large, pulsating purple crystal sat. Each of you will touch the crystal, Reginald explained. If it glows gold, your intentions are pure. If it turns red, you harbor deceit. If it turns black, well, let's not go there. One by one, the ladies approached. Lady Clementine, a stunning blonde with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, touched it. It glowed a bright, blinding gold. She curtsied smugly. Lady Penelope, a redhead with a perpetual sneer, also got gold. Holly watched, chewing her lip. My intentions? My intention is not to be calamari. When it was her turn, the room went silent. The other girls snickered. Look at her, she heard one whisper. She looks like she herds sheep. Holly marched up to the pedestal. She glanced at Sterling. He was watching her with genuine curiosity, perhaps wondering if the street rat from another world would explode. She placed her hand on the cold stone. It didn't glow gold. It didn't turn red. It swirled with a chaotic mix of neon pink and electric blue, vibrating hum that sounded like a kazoo. The room gasped. Reginald dropped his clipboard. Unprecedented. What does it mean? Sterling stepped forward, frowning. It means she's confusing the artifact. Holly pulled her hand away. It means I'm honest about not wanting to be here, but I also think your lizard form was kind of cute in a terrifying way. It's conflicted. Sterling blinked. A corner of his mouth twitched, almost threatening to smile. Is it dangerous? Reginald asked, trembling. Oh, for heaven's sake, Holly huffed. She grabbed the fist-sized crystal off the pedestal. Do not touch it. Beatrice shrieked from the sidelines. Holly marched up to Sterling. He towered over her, radiating heat that battled the room's chill. Up close, his eyes were mesmerizing, a deep, endless blue with flecks of silver. Here, Holly said, shoving the glowing, vibrating crystal directly into the breast pocket of his pristine ceremonial coat. You keep it. It matches your eyes. And it tells you that my only intent is to survive your crazy mother and this frozen reality show. She patted his chest, hard, right over the pocket. The contact sent a jolt through her fingertips that had nothing to do with the magic crystal. Sterling stiffened, his eyes widening slightly. You have spirit, Sterling murmured, looking down at her as if she were a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. I have survival instincts, she corrected. She turned on her heel and walked back to the line of stunned debutantes. Next. And here we have the gallery of ancestors, Beatrice droned, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. Following the Eye of Truth debacle, Beatrice had decided to assert dominance by taking Holly on a forced tour of the bastion, dragging along a gaggle of the other contestants. Holly was currently trailing behind Lady Victoria and Lady Daphne, who were loudly discussing the betting pool the court ladies had started. "I put 50 gold pieces that she's gone by Tuesday," Victoria giggled, adjusting her fur wrap. "She doesn't even know which fork to use for the fish course." "Generous," Daphne sneered. "I give her until the first dance. Did you see her shoes? Peasants shouldn't attempt to walk on marble." Holly gritted her teeth. "I hope you both get a rash," she thought. "And to your left," Beatrice announced, stopping before a massive mahogany door, "are the Duke's private quarters. Strictly forbidden to all, of course. The magic wards are lethal to intruders." Beatrice waved her hand, creating a shimmering illusion in the air to demonstrate the complex warding spells. However, to Holly's untrained eye, and perhaps due to the residual chaotic magic of the Eye of Truth still clinging to her, the illusion warped the hallway. When the group moved on, Holly lingered for a second to tie her shoe. When she stood up, the hallway seemed to curve. She saw what she thought was the door to the guest wing. "Hey, wait up," she called out, jogging toward the door and pushing it open with her shoulder. "I think I left my—" She didn't finish the sentence. She wasn't in the guest wing. She was in a massive bedroom dominated by a four-poster bed made of black iron and dark wood. A fire roared in the grate. And standing in the center of the room, midway through changing his shirt, was Duke Sterling. Holly skidded to a halt. Time seemed to freeze. Sterling was shirtless. And, sweet mother of mercy, the man was sculpted. Scars, faint, silvery lines, traced across a torso of hard muscle and defined abs that looked like they could grate cheese. Broad shoulders tapered down to a V-line that disappeared into his black breeches. He froze, a white linen shirt dangling from his hand. He looked at the door. He looked at Holly. Holly squeaked. Her face went from pale to nuclear red in a nanosecond. "The door, the hallway bent, your mother?" Sterling slowly lowered the shirt, not making any move to cover himself. He raised an eyebrow, an expression of utter amusement replacing his usual scowl. "Are you making a habit of barging into my life unannounced, Holly?" he drawled. "I didn't mean to." She covered her eyes with her hands, peering through the gap in her fingers. "You should lock your door." "It was locked. To everyone except those with my magical signature," he said, taking a step toward her. "Which begs the question, how did you get in?" "I don't know. I'm just a girl from London who wants a bagel." She turned around, fumbling for the handle. "I'm leaving. Forget I saw the abs. I mean nothing. I saw nothing." She threw the door open and practically fell into the corridor, slamming it shut behind her. From inside, she heard a sound she hadn't expected. A deep, rich, booming laugh. Breakfast the next morning was a battlefield of etiquette. The dining hall was long, the table set with enough silverware to perform surgery. The other contestants ate with delicate, bird-like movements, cutting their fruit into microscopic squares. Holly was hungry. She was tired of the cold, tired of the whispers, and tired of being the peasant. A servant placed a plate of fluffy, golden pancakes in front of her. Beside it lay 4 different forks and 2 knives. Sterling sat at the head of the table, reading a scroll. He hadn't looked up since they arrived. Holly looked at the silverware. She looked at Lady Clementine, who was watching her with a predatory smirk, waiting for a mistake. Screw it, Holly thought. She reached out, grabbed a whole pancake with her bare hand, spooned a dollop of jam into the center, and rolled it up like a cigar. The table went silent. The sound of silverware clinking against china ceased. Holly took a massive bite of the pancake taco, chewing enthusiastically. She caught Clementine's horrified stare and winked. She said with her mouth full. "Aerodynamics. It tastes better this way." At the head of the table, Sterling lowered his scroll. He looked at the rolled pancake in her hand. He looked at the horrified faces of the noble women. Slowly, deliberately, Sterling set down his silver fork. He picked up a pancake with his hand, folded it messily, and took a bite. Syrup dripped onto his thumb. He licked it off, ignoring the collective gasp of the room. "She has a point," Sterling said, his voice deadpan. "Efficient." Holly swallowed, fighting a smile. "Told you." For a second, across the length of the table, they shared a look, a conspiracy of two against the absurdity of the world. "The connection between a dragon and his mate is one of nature," Beatrice announced later that afternoon. They were in the winter garden, a glass-domed conservatory filled with exotic, frost-resistant plants. "Therefore, you shall each plant a moon lily. If your heart is true and your compatibility high, the lily will bloom by sunset." It was a gardening competition. Holly groaned internally. She had killed a cactus once. The ladies were given trowels and bulbs. They set to work, cooing at the dirt. Holly knelt at her designated plot, jabbing the frozen earth with her trowel. It was hard as rock. "Stupid dirt," she muttered. "Stupid contest. Stupid frozen Narnia. You're doing it wrong." She looked up. Sterling was crouching beside her. He had shed his formal coat, rolling up his sleeves to reveal muscular forearms. "I'm doing it with passion," Holly retorted. "It's the soil that has an attitude problem. Here." He reached over, his large hand covering hers on the handle of the trowel. The moment their skin touched, it happened. It wasn't a static shock. It was a surge of raw power, a crackle of blue electricity that audibly zapped through the air. The hair on Holly's arm stood up. A distinct smell of ozone filled the space between them. Sterling jerked back as if burned, staring at his hand, then at her. His eyes were wide, the pupils dilated. "Did you feel that?" Holly whispered, rubbing her tingling hand. "Static," Sterling said quickly, though his voice lacked conviction. "Just dry air." He cleared his throat and stood up abruptly. "Dig deeper. The roots need warmth." He walked away fast, leaving Holly staring at the dirt. In the hole they had touched, a tiny green shoot was already aggressively poking through the soil, growing at a visible rate. "Ladies, your attention," Reginald announced the next morning. "The Duke has decided to escalate matters. Phase 2 begins now, individual dates." A collective squeal went up from the group. Holly just sighed. "However," Reginald continued, "the Duke wishes to assess your intellectual capacities. You are free to roam the Royal Library until noon." The library was a labyrinth of towering shelves and floating candles. Holly wandered away from the giggling group, seeking solitude. She loved books. They were safer than dragons. She turned down a narrow aisle in the dark history section and heard hushed voices coming from the other side of the shelf. "Tonight, the dose must be precise." "Are you sure? It could kill him." "It won't kill him. Just make him pliable. He needs to choose me, not that otherworldly stray. The potion of binding is undetectable in wine." Holly froze. "A love potion? No, that sounded more like a magical roofie." She tried to peek through a gap in the books, but a thick encyclopedia on carnivorous snowflakes blocked her view. She couldn't see the speakers, but the voice was high and cultured. It could have been any of the contestants. She waited until the footsteps faded, then bolted. She had to tell Sterling. She found him in his study, buried under maps. "Sterling," she burst in, breathless. "You're in danger. One of the girls, I don't know who, is planning to drug you with a potion tonight." Sterling looked up, rubbing his temples. He looked exhausted. "A potion? Holly, this isn't a melodramatic novel. I heard them in the library. They called it a potion of binding." Sterling sighed, leaning back. "The library is full of echo spells. You likely heard a recitation from a drama class in the lower ward. Or," his eyes narrowed slightly, "you're trying to cast suspicion on your rivals because you feel threatened." "Threatened?" Holly bristled. "I'm trying to save your scaly hide. I don't care about winning." "Don't you?" Sterling asked softly. "Everyone wants something, Holly. Even you."
Fine, Ollie snapped.
"Drink the wine. Marry a sociopath. See if I care." She stormed out, blind with frustration. She turned left instead of right, stomping down a spiral staircase she thought led to her room. It did not lead to her room. It led down, deeper into the stone, until the air grew musty and the temperature dropped even further. She was in the catacombs. Great, she muttered. Just great. Now, I'm lost in the dungeon. A low growl echoed from the shadows. Holly froze. Mr. Kraken? She whispered. A small burst of flame illuminated the dark. It wasn't the Kraken. It was a dragon, but a tiny one, the size of a golden retriever, with scales like polished obsidian and big, goofy yellow eyes. Oh, Holly exhaled. You're just a baby. The dragon, Sterling's pet, Fluff, or Pushik in the ancient tongue, chirped. He crouched low, his tail wagging like a dog's. You want to play? Holly asked. Fluff roared, a sound like a squeaky toy, and lunged.
Okay, tag.
You're it! Holly shrieked, turning and running back up the stairs. The dragon gave chase, scrambling over the stone with claws clicking. Holly scrambled up a ventilation shaft that looked promising, crawling through the dust and cobwebs, the happy yips of the dragon echoing behind her. She saw a grate ahead with light pouring through. She kicked it open. Freedom, she yelled, diving out. She tumbled out of the opening, covered in soot, leaves, and spiderwebs. She rolled down a small grassy embankment and landed face first in a meticulously manicured hedge. She groaned and rolled over. Standing directly above her were Sterling and Lady Clementine. They were holding teacups. They looked immaculate. Oh, Holly said, spitting out a leaf.
Eat.
Holly. Sterling stared, bewildered. Before he could say more, Fluff exploded out of the ventilation shaft. The dragon, excited to see his master, ignored gravity and launched himself into the air. Busok, no! Sterling shouted. The dragon slammed into Sterling's chest. Sterling staggered back, tripped over Holly's prone legs, and went down. Holly tried to scramble away, but Sterling landed heavily on top of her, shielding her from the flailing dragon limbs. For a moment, it was chaos, claws, wings, teacups flying. When the dust settled, they were a tangle of limbs on the grass. Sterling was pinned over Holly, his face inches from hers. His heavy coat was open, pressing against her. Fluff was sitting on Sterling's back, licking the Duke's ear happily. Lady Clementine let out a shriek of indignation.
Well.
I never. Sterling didn't look at Clementine. He was looking at Holly, breathless. There was soot on her nose. Her hair was a disaster. And he was smiling. A genuine, unguarded smile. You really do know how to make an entrance, he whispered. Holly grinned back, despite herself. I told you. Survival instincts. Pushik, let go. Sterling commanded, trying to untangle his sleeve from the baby dragon's jaws. But Fluff, or Pushik, was insistent. He wasn't playing anymore. His obsidian scales were bristling, and he let out a series of urgent, high-pitched chirps, tugging Sterling's cuff toward the castle entrance. He then grabbed the hem of Holly's ruined dress and yanked her in the same direction. He smells magic, Sterling realized, his playful demeanor vanishing instantly. Residual magic. Someone used a spell recently, and he's tracking the signature. The library, Holly gasped, scrambling to her feet. The potion I told you about. He knows. They didn't run, they sprinted. With the dragon leading the charge like a bloodhound, they burst through the heavy oak doors of the royal library. The room was silent, save for the crackle of the hearth. But Pushik didn't stop. He scrambled up a ladder and glided across to the secluded alchemy and poisons alcove. There, freezing in horror as the baby dragon landed on the table in front of her, was Lady Penelope. In her hand was a small, uncorked vial of iridescent violet liquid, the potion of binding. My lord, Penelope stammered, trying to hide the vial behind her back. I was just dusting. Sterling's expression turned into a glacier.
He didn't yell.
He didn't rage. He simply extended his hand. Give it to me. Trembling, Penelope handed over the vial. Sterling sniffed it once, his eyes flashing dangerous blue. Binding root and siren's tear, he identified coldly. Enough to enslave a man's will for a decade. You intended to strip me of my mind, so you could wear a crown.
I.
I only wanted to ensure. You are disqualified, Sterling's voice boomed, shaking the dust off the ancient books. Guards. Escort Lady Penelope to the border. She leaves Everwinter within the hour. As Penelope was dragged away, sobbing about how she just wanted to be a duchess, Holly leaned against a bookshelf, wiping soot from her forehead. So, she murmured, not a drama class recitation, huh? Sterling looked at her, the anger in his eyes softening into something akin to respect.
No.
Not a recitation. You were right, Holly. I apologize. The victory was short-lived. By evening, the remaining contestants had turned the common room into a den of vipers. They sat on plush divans, showing off the apology gifts Sterling had sent them for the stress of the investigation: diamond earrings, silk scarves, enchanted mirrors. Holly, having received nothing, sat in the corner reading a book on goblin economics. Poor thing, Lady Victoria whispered loudly. Not even a trinket. It's clear the Duke only keeps her around for entertainment. She's the court jester, not a potential bride. She probably smells like sit still, Daphne laughed. Perhaps her gift was a bar of soap and she lost it. Holly ignored them, but the word stung. She retreated to her room, her stomach growling. She hadn't eaten since the pancake incident. On her bedside table, a carafe of berry juice glistened invitingly. Finally, room service, she thought. She poured a glass and downed it in one go. It was sweet, tart, and refreshing. 3 seconds later, the world tilted. It wasn't a normal dizziness. It felt like her veins were being filled with lead. Her heart rate plummeted, the thumping slowing to a terrifying, sluggish rhythm. Her limbs went numb. She tried to call out, but her throat felt paralyzed. She collapsed onto the rug, her vision tunneling into darkness. So this is it, she thought groggily. Killed by juice. How embarrassing. Suddenly, the door exploded inward. Splinters of wood flew across the room as Sterling burst in, his eyes glowing with frantic magical energy. He had felt the disturbance in the wards, a life flickering out. Holly. He was at her side in an instant. He didn't ask questions. He pulled a flask from his belt, a bitter, dark sludge he always carried for emergencies, and forced it past her lips. Swallow, he commanded, massaging her throat. Come on, Holly. Fight it. The antidote tasted like burnt rubber and earwax. Holly gagged, coughing violently as the paralysis shattered. She gasped, sucking in air, tears streaming down her face. That was awful, she wheezed. It was sleepy mistletoe venom, Sterling said grimly, pulling her up and wrapping his arms around her trembling frame. Another minute, and your heart would have stopped. He held her tightly, rocking her slightly. For the first time, Holly realized he was trembling too. The mighty dragon Duke was shaking. I'm taking you out of here, he said hoarsely. My quarters. Where I can see you. The fireplace hall in Sterling's private wing was a sanctuary of warmth. He had wrapped Holly in 3 different fur throws and placed a mug of hot chocolate, the real kind, thick and rich, in her hands. He sat on the rug beside her chair, watching her with intensity. I should cancel the selection, he said quietly. Send everyone home. This is getting too dangerous. You can't, Holly said, blowing on her cocoa. Your mother said the Queen mandated it. If you cancel, you lose the bastion. You lose your home. I don't care about the castle. I care about. He stopped, looking away. About not having a corpse for a bride? Holly teased gently. Sterling let out a breathy laugh. Yes, that. He waved his hand toward the high-vaulted ceiling. Look up. The stone ceiling dissolved. In its place, the night sky appeared, swirling with the aurora borealis. Ribbons of emerald, violet, and sapphire danced above them, illuminating the room in a soft, magical glow. It's beautiful, Holly whispered, her breath catching. Is this real? It's an illusion, Sterling admitted. But it's what I see when I fly above the cloud layer. I wanted you to see it. It's peaceful. Up there are no politics, no poisons. just the wind and the light. "It must be lonely," Holly said, looking at him instead of the lights. It was. Sterling met her gaze. Until recently. The air between them shifted, heavy with unspoken words. They sat in comfortable silence for a long time, the trust between them solidifying into something stronger than the crystal walls of the bastion. "Let's catch the rat," Holly said suddenly, setting her mug down. "Someone tried to kill me. I want to know who." Sterling grinned, a feral, predatory sharpness returning to his smile. "I thought you'd never ask. Pushik is ready." The night raid was swift. With Pushik sniffing out the origin of the mistletoe poison, they bypassed the girls' quarters entirely and ended up in the West Wing, the administrative offices. Pushik scratched furiously at the door of advisor Reginald. "Reginald," Holly whispered. "The squeaky guy with the clipboard?" They broke in. The office was a mess of papers. Sterling rifled through the desk, finding a ledger hidden under a false bottom. "He's been embezzling funds," Sterling muttered. "And here, a correspondence with an external party. The obstacles are being removed. The ice dragon will fall." "He's not working alone," Holly realized. "He's sabotaging this election to keep you single. Or to distract you." Before they could investigate further, the heavy toll of the morning bell rang. They had to leave before the staff arrived. Later that morning, Duchess Beatrice intercepted Holly. "Walk with me," the Duchess commanded. There was no malice in her voice today, only a grim fatigue. She led Holly up the spiral stairs to the highest spire of the bastion, the pinnacle of frost. The wind whipped around them as they stepped onto the observation deck. "Look," Beatrice pointed over the massive walls. Holly gasped. She expected snow, forests, maybe a frozen lake. What she saw was a graveyard. The land beyond the bastion wasn't just winter, it was dead. Gray, ash-like snow-covered petrified trees. The sky was a bruised purple. There was no movement, no life. Just an endless, silent void. "This is Everwinter," Beatrice said softly. "The glamorous castle, the parties, the magic, it is a cage. A bubble." "What happened?" "A curse." Beatrice turned to her. "Generations ago. The dragon line is the only thing keeping the void at bay. But the magic is fading. The prophecy states that for spring to return, the dragon must give everything. Not just his magic, his life essence." Holly felt the blood drain from her face. "You mean, Sterling has to die? Eventually. The curse consumes the bearer. That is why I push him to marry. To produce an heir before the cold takes him completely. If he dies without an heir, the barrier falls, and everyone in this valley dies." Holly stared at the woman she had thought was a villain. She was just a desperate mother preparing to bury her son. Holly found Sterling in the armory. She was panic-stricken. "We have to leave," she grabbed his arm. "Your mother told me. The curse. You're going to die if you stay here." Sterling paused, sharpening a sword. He sighed, putting the whetstone down. "Mother has a flair for the dramatic. It's not a death sentence, Holly. It's a duty. I manage the cold. I've fine. She showed me the wasteland. It's eating the world. It's an old wives' tale." Sterling cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheeks. "I am not going to die. I promise. Tonight is the winter ball. I need you to focus. Can you do that for me?" He kissed her forehead, a soft, lingering touch that felt too much like a goodbye. "I have a surprise for you." The winter ball was a spectacle of light and ice. The orchestra played on instruments made of glass. The chandeliers dripped with diamonds. Holly descended the grand staircase. She wasn't wearing her gray rag. She was wearing a gown Sterling had commissioned, liquid silver that moved like water, hugging her curves and flaring out at the bottom like moonlight on snow. The room went silent. Even Victoria and Daphne stopped their sniping. Sterling met her at the bottom of the stairs. He wore a white military uniform with silver epaulets, looking every bit the fairy tale prince.
"Breath."
"Taking," he murmured, offering his arm. "May I have this dance?" "I don't know the steps," Holly whispered, terrified. "Close your eyes," he commanded softly. "And follow my hands." They swept onto the floor. It wasn't just a dance, it was flight. Sterling guided her with effortless strength, spinning her until the room blurred into streaks of color. For a moment, the curse, the poison, and the Kraken didn't exist. There was only the heat of his hand on her waist. During the intermission, servants passed around trays of mist wine, a specialty that smoked in the glass. To the future Duchess, a servant beamed, handing Holly a glass. Thirsty from the waltz, Holly took a sip. It was spicy and warm. 10 minutes later, the hallucination started. The guests turned into penguins. The chandeliers morphed into giant spiders. Holly giggled, batting at a non-existent butterfly. Too many penguins, she mumbled, wandering away from the crowd. Need to find the exit. Disoriented by the fog wine, a classic sabotage tactic, she stumbled through the corridors. She found a door that smelled like pine and ozone. Sterling, her brain supplied.
Safe.
She crawled into the massive bed, curled up under the duvet, and passed out immediately. She woke up to the sound of birds, or rather, Pushik chirping. She opened one eye. She was in Sterling's bed. Again. And Sterling was sitting in a chair nearby, watching her, a fond smile playing on his lips. "Good morning, Goldilocks," he said. Did we? Holly checked under the covers. She was still in her silver dress. "You told me my pillow was a marshmallow and tried to eat it," Sterling informed her. "Then you fell asleep. I slept on the sofa." He tossed her a small velvet pouch. "Open it." Inside was a pendant, a moonstone carved in the shape of a snowflake. "It's an amulet," he said. "It detects poisons and illusions. Wear it. I'm not having you turn into a vegetable again." Downstairs, the atmosphere was grim. Sterling stood before the hungover contestants. "Lady Victoria," he announced. "Your personal maid was seen dosing Miss Holly's wine. You are dismissed." Victoria shrieked, but the guards dragged her out. Now only Daphne and Holly remained. The final task, Reginald squeaked, sweating profusely. "To run a kingdom, one must understand the economy. You must solve this complex equation regarding the taxation of ice exports and goblin labor tariffs." He slammed a blackboard down. It was covered in numbers that looked like alien hieroglyphics. Holly stared at it. She was a barista in her old life. She knew how to calculate a tip, not a kingdom's GDP. Daphne immediately began scribbling furiously, looking smug. Holly felt panic rising. If she lost, she went to the Kraken. If she won, she had to deal with the curse. She looked at Sterling. He was watching her, waiting. Screw it, she thought. Humor is my only weapon. She flipped her board over. She didn't write numbers. She wrote, in giant letters, "I am pregnant." Reginald gasped. "By the gods." Sterling choked on his water. He coughed, his face turning red, tears of laughter springing to his eyes. He read the smaller text she had scribbled underneath. "Just kidding. Math is hard. Please don't feed me to the squid." Sterling wiped his eyes, struggling to compose himself. A unique approach to crisis management. He looked at Daphne's board, which was perfectly correct. Then he looked at Holly's disastrous joke. "Lady Daphne," Sterling announced, his voice hard. "Your calculations are flawless. You are the winner." Holly's heart stopped. She felt cold all over. I lost," she whispered. "Guards," Sterling said, not looking at Holly. "Escort Lady Daphne to the bridal suite to prepare for the wedding. Miss Holly, pack your bags." Holly cried while she packed. She shoved the silver dress into her suitcase. He had played her. The dance, the amulet, the hot chocolate, it was all part of the show. She dragged her suitcase to the front gates, where a carriage waited to take her to the rift. Leaving so soon? Beatrice stood by the carriage. But something was wrong. Her eyes were green, not gray. And she was smiling. A twisted, cruel smile. "You aren't Beatrice," Holly stepped back. "Clever girl," the woman sneered. She grabbed Holly's arm. Her grip was like iron. "Sterling thinks he's clever, using Daphne as bait to draw me out. But I know his weakness is you." The woman whistled. A massive, shadowy gargoyle swooped down from the stormy sky. She threw Holly onto its back and climbed on behind her. To the windy cliff, the false Beatrice screamed. Meanwhile, in the throne room, Sterling had Daphne cornered. Or rather, he had Reginald cornered, while Daphne cowered in fear. "The game is up, Reginald," Sterling roared, his sword drawn. "I know you're working for Vanessa." Reginald fell to his knees. "She promised me power. She said she just wanted to destroy the dragon line." "Where is she?" Sterling demanded, the tip of his blade at Reginald's throat. She intercepted the girl," Reginald sobbed. "She took Holly to the cliffs. She's going to throw her into the churning sea." Sterling didn't finish the interrogation. He turned and sprinted, transforming mid-stride. His body elongated, scales erupted from his skin, and with a roar that shook the foundations of the bastion, the white dragon took flight, crashing through the stained glass window. The windy cliff was a jagged finger of rock extending over the boiling black ocean. The wind howled like a banshee. Vanessa, Sterling's ex-fiancée, a sorceress banished years ago, held Holly over the edge. Her disguise had melted away, revealing a woman with wild red hair and eyes full of madness. "He chose duty over me," Vanessa screamed over the wind. "So now, he chooses death over you." "He didn't choose me," Holly yelled, kicking at the air. "He picked the math genius." "Oh, please. The way he looks at you? It's nauseating." A roar split the sky. Sterling dove from the clouds, shifting back into human form as he landed on the rock, sword in hand. "Vanessa, let her go." "Sterling," Vanessa purred. "One step closer and she flies." "Why are you doing this?" "If I can't have the bastion, no one can. I will break you." She shoved Holly. It wasn't a threat. She just did it. Holly didn't scream. She just gasped as gravity took her. She fell backward into the mist, the dark water rushing up to meet her. "No!" Sterling screamed. He didn't hesitate. He didn't think about the curse or the throne or the cold. He dove after her. As he fell, he reached deep inside himself. He felt the burning core of his magic, the winter force that kept the world frozen, the power that was slowly killing him. "Take it," he thought. "Take it all." He grabbed Holly midair, pulling her against his chest. They hit the water. But instead of freezing death, the water exploded with light. Sterling released his magic. All of it. He pushed the power out of his body and into the ocean, into the earth. The curse required a sacrifice of life force. He gave it the biggest magical detonation in history.